yes, the flame market is in my right. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister liked to go grocery shopping together, Mr. Speaker. And if you had, you would know that, of course, food prices have risen 36% faster in Canada than they did in the United States during the last 4 years, and that gap grew in line with the carbon tax. The leader of the NDP apparently likes to shop at Metro, for which his brother's company is the chief lobbyist. So maybe the leader of the NDP can tell us, 24 Liberal MPs have lost confidence in the Prime Minister. Will the leader of the NDP finally vote for a carbon tax election?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there wasn't a question for the government in that, but let me reiterate that multiple analysts, economists, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer have indicated that lowering inflation has made it easier on Canadians, and the price on pollution that delivers the Canada carbon rebate to Canadians right across the country and puts more money in their pockets is actually helping Canadians with affordability. But if the Leader of the Opposition really wanted to help with affordability, he wouldn't have voted against dental care. He wouldn't have voted against a national school food program that's saving hundreds of dollars a year to parents right across the country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, even Liberal MPs know now, because their constituents keep telling them, that the carbon tax is driving up the cost of food. They wanted to go to caucus today and tell the Prime Minister that Canadians are literally starving, some eating out of dumpsters, because of the carbon tax. But he sent out his immigration minister to attack them, saying that they are, quote, garbage. What's garbage is the Prime Minister's record doubling housing costs, driving up food prices, and forcing people to eat out of dumpsters. Will he stop treating his own MPs and Canadians like garbage?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think the Leader of the Conservative Party shouldn't be bragging that none of his MPs have asked him to get a security clearance so that he can actually protect his party from foreign interference. That none of his MPs have spoken out. That having one of their members go down to Florida on an all-expenses-paid trip by an extreme anti-abortion church is just fine for all of their MPs. And that, quite frankly, none of them have any issue with a member on their front bench dining with a neo-Nazi. Mr. Speaker, I would hope some of his members in his caucus would speak up about some of the problems.
Told you he's so predictable. He tries so hard at the very beginning to not get angry, but give it 10, 15 minutes, he starts yelling.
Halton Hills to please not speak out of turn repeatedly during this question. He's an honourable and very well-respected member. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, who has a lifelong record of racist outbursts, is now coming unglued on the floor of the House of Commons. The question was about the 24 Liberal MPs in his caucus that are trying to speak out against his quadrupling of the carbon tax, not because they care about the cost of living of their constituents, but because they're worried they're going to lose the election. So if the Prime Minister is so confident in quadrupling the carbon tax, why won't he call a carbon tax election now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our price on pollution not only decreases emissions and helps fight climate change, but it grows the economy and investments, and it puts more money in the pockets of middle-class Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, what we've seen from the Parliamentary Budget Officer is the Canada carbon rebate puts more money back in the pockets of Canadian families than it costs them in the federal price on pollution. And that is exactly what the Leader of the Opposition wants to cut. He wants to cut affordability for Canadians. He wants to cut the fight against climate change. That's not how you build a strong future.
Your taxes aren't stopping climate change, buddy.
None have said.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Taxes and housing costs. Now, on that subject, the Prime Minister created a $4 billion so-called housing accelerator that gave hundreds of millions of dollars to big city politicians across the country. Toronto got the money, and construction went down 20%. Winnipeg got the money, construction went down 15%. Vancouver got the money, construction went down 19%. Ottawa got the money, construction went down 10%. Mr. Speaker, when I was the housing minister, we built 194,000 homes. Why won't he follow my common sense example?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The member opposite was Stephen Harper's failed housing minister. He built 6 affordable housing units across the country. So we'll take no lessons from them on housing.
Because
they
houses
would
were
rather
affordable.
pick fights rather than invest in the kinds of changes that are improving density and zoning, using public lands, accelerating red tape so that people can get more affordable housing built quicker right across the country. It takes actions and investments to build up this country. That's exactly what we're doing in responsible ways. All he's offering is fights with the provinces and municipalities and cuts to services Canadians rely on.
He just said he's accelerating red tape, so he's making it
Honourable Leader
worse.
of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he just accidentally told the truth. He said he's accelerating red tape. He sure is doing that, but he's not accelerating his math lessons. He's always admitted that he's been bad with numbers. I have the documents from Stats Canada's website, that's part of his government, that shows that in 2015, there were 194,461,000 housing completions, and the average rent was only $973 for a one-bedroom, half of what it is today. Given that I delivered so many affordable homes, why won't the Prime Minister follow my common sense plan to build the homes, not the bureaucracy?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it says something about the level of confidence the previous Prime Minister had in that member when Stephen Harper used to say the federal government has no responsibility around housing and then asks him to be their housing minister. That's perhaps why he delivered only 6 affordable homes over the course of their years in government. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we have stepped up to invest in densification, in cutting red tape, in creating more housing starts right across the country, working with municipalities and provinces to solve this housing crisis, while all he offers is cuts and breaks to wealthy landlords.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it is this Liberal Prime Minister that said a year ago that the federal government has no responsibility for housing. Of course, he said that after he had completed the doubling of housing costs. And then, speaking of housing ministers, he went on to point the guy who had lost track of 1 million people coming into the country, who had allowed a 300% increase in population growth against the warnings about housing from his own department. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister plans to reverse and swallow himself whole on immigration. Will he complete the job by firing his housing minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have continued to step up and invest in housing by working with provinces and municipalities right across the country, because of course we know that actions of previous governments, of Conservative and Liberal stripes, underinvested for many years in housing, which is why we're in the situation we're in, a situation not dissimilar to many advanced democracies around the world. That is exactly why we have stepped up to put money on the table for municipalities as they change their densification rules and zoning laws to accelerate the process of building housing and continue to solve this housing crisis that Canadians are facing from coast to coast to coast.
That's right.